Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. My name is Dean Jones, and I'm your host. This is Season 7, Episode 18. Today, we're very lucky to have on our program, all the way from London, England, Angela Clutton, who is a writer and a spokesperson for Borough Market in London, and also a recipe developer for them. She is also host of the popular Borough Market Cookbook Club podcast. Check that out on all major services such as Spotify, Anchor, etc. We will also provide links to the podcast in the bio. She has a book out called Vinegar Cupboard, which I can't talk enough about, and it's just really a wonderful book that she's published in 2019 and really knocked my socks off with this information on science behind vinegar, how it works, what it is, how it's been used in culture and society and history, and more. She's been on TV quite a bit on Channel 5's recent Inside series and episodes of the featured food historian for Channel 5's The Bone Detectives and BBC-Side's Inside the Christmas Factory and BBC's Rip-Off Britain Food. She writes for the Borough Market, for whom she's also a recipe developer, demonstrator cook, and a host of the popular Borough Market Cookbook Club. She also has the host of the Borough Talks digital events podcast series on food and food culture we just mentioned. We're going to have links to all this on the bio. You want to check that out, as well as you could purchase her book, The Vinegar Cupboard, on the links as well. We talk about a lot in the interview, but I really want to recommend it so much because, just simple things like vinegar being included in soda bread, which adds a lot of flavor to it, as well as complex things on how to cook with it, with meat and fruit and different types of vegetables. And it's just a really wonderful cookbook. So that being said, we want to go ahead and go to my interview with Angela Clutton. Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. Today, I'm speaking with author, broadcaster, and award-winning writer, Angela Clutton. Her recent book, The Vinegar Cupboard, has won several awards, not the least of which is the Jane Grigson Trust Award. She hosts the lovely and informative podcast, Borough Talks, of which I'm a recent fan. Angela, I want to welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to talk to you, Dean.
Now, for our listeners who are not familiar with your work, can you just give a little bit about yourself?
I can, although I think you've given it a pretty good go. I live in London, and I'm a food writer, as you say. So I have one published cookbook, and I have news actually on a next book, which is exciting. It is exciting. So I write about food. I do a little bit of broadcast work. I do the podcast. As you mentioned, I do a lot of work with Borough Market. And as I say, I live in London, North London, for anyone who knows London pretty well. Me and my husband, and I feel very, very lucky to be a food writer and actually love what I do. If any of us, I think, who can say that we enjoy our work are truly, truly blessed, because really not everyone has that.
Now, you work as a writer and food historian, and we've had a few wonderful food historians on the guests, and I always love talking to them because food history really is something I really get excited about. But where did this begin with you? How did you get your interest in food history? Did this start when you were young?
I was always very interested in history, and I did classics at university. So that was a big, obviously an indicator of how I have always been very interested in different civilizations and what makes them tick, really. And what makes most of us tick in some way is food. And so I think it was an interest in history and civilization, which I'd always had, which then when I started to kind of work in food, those two things came together as being a very natural fit. And it's about what food tells you about people, place and time. And I think food can be a lens into those things in a way that almost nothing else can, in quite the same way, because obviously food affects us all, the having and the not having. So it's something which came very naturally. It was a real evolution for me.
Now, your curriculum vitae is very, very impressive. You've written for many publications, including the Daily Telegraph, The Independent, and Country Life. And you have a regular column for Borough Market, for which you are also a recipe writer. When did the writing begin for you? When did you decide to kind of pursue that?
So this is very much a second career for me. So I am in my mid-40s and I have been working in food probably a dozen or so years. So before working in food, and indeed before writing, I worked in theatre. I was a theatre producer for a long time. I did shows in the West End and touring around the UK, and even was lucky enough to do a show on Broadway. So theatre was very much my life and my focus, until I kind of fell out of love with it and got very burnt out. And it's, as any of your listeners will know who work in theatre, it's a real way of life, you know. It's like such a culture of, it takes over your life in a way. And I just sort of reached a point of thinking, I've loved it. Am I really going to do this for the next 20 years? Probably not. So I took a break, and so I just sort of stopped. I had nothing to go to, and was a bit of a poor as a church mouse for a little bit while I worked out exactly what I was going to do, because I didn't really have a plan, but I knew unless I took a jump, I probably wasn't going to actually do something. I'd sort of stay in the safe ground of doing what I was doing. So I took a break, and the food and the writing just kind of happened. It's a funny thing. I have always been interested in English and English literature and writing. So that came first before the food. I was never really a great cook. My friends at university would laugh that I lived off microwave jacket potatoes and baked beans. You know, I was really not a cook. And so for me now to write cookbooks is kind of bonkers, but that came after the writing, and it just sort of all came together really. My interest in language, my interest in history, as I've just been talking about, and then getting more and more into cooking just happened. That's such a vague answer, isn't it? That say it just sort of happened, but it kind of did.
It's so hard to believe that you were not like really cooking for, you know, earlier, and that you, because like you, when you read your stuff, I mean, you really, it's impressive. Like, it's not simple stuff. It's not like some, you know, I've seen writers who are food writers that kind of throw off some stuff, and it's like, you know, whatever, you know, but I don't feel that with you at all. It's like really impressive work.
Well,
And it's just,
oh, that's really kind. Once I, sort of decided this is something I wanted to pursue, then I really kind of went for it and really immersed myself in teaching myself, properly how to cook. But I'm very much a home cook rather than a trained chef. And I grew up with good food. I didn't learn how to cook. But my mum, she cooked, a fresh meal for the family every night, which is extraordinary privilege to kind of grow up in that way. So I grew up with an awareness of how important nurturing through food can be. It's just that I didn't actually learn to do it at that point.
I mean, I really, I want to talk about the Vinegar Cupboard, because I had actually, purchased it recently, and I really dug into it. My wife will tell you that I've been reading it like every night for like a week and kind of just going over it, because there's a lot there that's so fascinating. It's not just a cookbook where, you have some recipes. It's got a lot to it. There's a lot on history. There's a lot on science and how vinegar works. There's a lot about what exactly vinegar is, which, you think would be a simple question, because we see vinegar, we take it for granted. Was that kind of a sense in your mind when you wrote the book, when you decided to write it?
I think you've just put your finger on it, Dean. That idea that we take vinegar for granted was very much the starting point of why I wanted to do it, really. I think, we all think of vinegar as being so ordinary, and actually it's completely extraordinary, and what it can do to your food and your cooking is quite extraordinary. But I sort of had this, as I just explained, I sort of started to kind of teach myself about food, and so through doing that, I built an awareness of the role of acidity in building flavour and bringing flavours together. And then it just sort of started to occur to me that that's something which people don't really think about a lot. When we think about seasoning a dish, salt tends to be what we all go for. If you taste it, it's not quite right, you go for the salt. And salt is obviously brilliant and does a very important job. But acidity is something which I think is very, very underrated. And squeeze of lemon, it's great, splash of wine, it's great. But vinegar and the range of the different kinds of vinegars are such an important tool to have, and I think really, really underrated. And I started, as I was getting more and more into cooking and was writing recipes and doing things, the book's called The Vinegar Cupboard because I genuinely have a cupboard of vinegars. I live in a tiny, tiny London flat, tiny kitchen. You open the cupboard and baking tins fall out because there's no space for it. Except, the vinegars kind of, relax in this cupboard where, more space than anything else has. And that was a very real thing of me sort of starting to try different kinds of vinegars and wanting to see what they did to my cooking. And so that was where the name of the book came from. And as I was getting more and more of them, I did just really think, God, I think people need to know more about this. And certainly in the UK, the books that have been about vinegar, to which I mean no disrespect to any of them, they're just doing a very different job. They were either olive oil and vinegar, of which vinegar was very much the second partner, and so treated in a very, very superficial way in terms of the book, or those books that kind of say how to clean your windows with it, which again is great, but just not what I wanted to do. I wanted to explore the global heritage of vinegar and what it tells you, again, about people, place and time, people to understand about different vinegar cultures, I suppose, and to really kind of think about what different vinegars can do in your cooking. So all of that became this book that I became incredibly committed to doing, even though almost every publisher in London turned me down.
What excited me the most about the book was there was so much in there about vinegar that was exciting and new to me. And I don't think anybody would get this book and pick it up and go, oh yeah, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And like, they would like be stopping a lot going, oh, hold on a minute. And they would want to start reading. What was that really kind of gets me to want to ask you, what was this research like for you? And was it exciting? Was it kind of blowing your mind when you're finding out all these new things?
Oh, I loved it. I loved doing the research. And again, that kind of goes back to the slightly kind of, nerdy historian bit of it, of really kind of, delving into all that and discovering about, Japanese vinegars and Chinese vinegars and wine vinegar, and really, just being able to relish discovering all of that. But then, of course, you have the tussle of how to try and translate all of this research into something which is kind of readable, not overwhelming in being too much information. And so you kind of have the fun research bit, and then you look back and go, oh, okay, so now I know all this. How do I turn it into something which, Dean, seeing it in America is going to find in any way interesting to read? And so that, once you've done the research, that's the challenge, really.
Now, I want to go back to a question that you asked in the book in the beginning. What is vinegar?
What is vinegar? So vinegar is, well, there's so many different answers to that, I suppose, at different kind of levels of the question. What is vinegar? Vinegar is this wonderful way of having a natural preservative. Before anyone was able to kind of manufacture anything, vinegar just happens naturally. And so the what is vinegar in that sense is it is the end result of any sugar-rich produce. So that could be grapes, it could be rice, it could be tomatoes, anything which is sugar-rich has got the potential to be turned into alcohol. Those sugars become an alcohol. You're fermenting, obviously, and then you ferment them one more time, and then the alcohol becomes vinegar. So if you have a bottle of wine that you leave open on the side for too long, it goes a bit vinegary because it is actually doing this natural process of turning into vinegar. And so that's true, not just for things like wine and cider, because they have already done the initial stage. If you go back a bit and you have the grapes, you have the apples, plums, pears, potatoes, asparagus, anything which is sugar rich can, in theory and in actuality, be double fermented into vinegar.
I wanted to ask you because, as I already said, we take this for granted. I go and buy vinegar regularly. We don't really think much about it. I buy a gallon of it at a time.
What kind of vinegar
types.
do you tend to buy?
So I buy, if I'm doing a certain type of pickles, I'll get like a gallon of just what is called white vinegar. Yeah. And then I buy a lot of cider vinegar. I use it a lot. And then I'll buy balsamic or red wine for pickling sometimes too, depending on what it is, or for dressings and stuff. And then I'll get black vinegar for some Chinese dishes or to have as a condiment with Chinese dishes. But mostly, I would say like the biggest household thing we buy is like the big jugs of cider vinegar.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you have, a lot of vinegar being sold around where you are, which is great.
No, it's nice because there's all these places where I can get different types. Like there's one that's hard to find that I love. It's pineapple vinegar. And I use it
Ooh,
for cooking pork and stuff, or making like cortado, which is something I make with certain dishes. But I just like, it has an importance because it was such an essential survival tool, wasn't it, for many cultures? Like it was
yeah,
really important to preserve foods. Am I
yeah,
correct?
yeah, completely correct. Long before any idea of fridges and things, you had this natural preservative which naturally occurs. You don't have to do anything. We do now, to kind of make it fast or make it in large quantities or to make it have certain flavor profiles. But broadly, you don't have to do anything to it. And that, is a huge asset and really speaks to why vinegar is so widespread. At the beginning of the book, there's a map which shows the vinegars all over the world, and it's pretty much all over the world. You look at that world map and you kind of go, oh my God, it really, really is everywhere. Weirdly, the only place I wasn't able to discover much vinegar culture, well, not weirdly, it was just interestingly, was Russia. That there's not much of a vinegar culture there. They kind of, they tend to preserve and ferment in a different way.
Oh
But
yeah.
other than that, the map was really Africa, all the
Yeah.
Americas, Asia, really, really widespread and absolutely fascinating.
Now, this episode is sponsored by Culinary Historians of Northern California, a Bay Area educational group dedicated to the study of food, drink, and culture in human history. To learn more about this organization and their work, please visit their website at www.chnorcal.org. I was surprised because the section on sauces was very impressive, and it really had me get a hankering to try some of these sauces and get, because I'm always kind of terrified of them, but it made me it seemed very inviting for it. But I was surprised at how many common sauces that are used in restaurants have vinegar in them. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I love sauces. And I think sauces are one of those things that need a bit of demystifying. I think we all get a bit carried away by hollandaise, bechamel,
Yeah.
velouté, all these words. They're going to make a velouté. And, it's these things are really so simple. It's partly, the French mother sauces have given this impression of them being quite difficult, they're being artistry to them. And that's partly what the French wanted people to think. But they're really, really simple. And a lot of them, so the ones I'm talking about in that last sentence about mainly these French mother sauces, they're quite buttery, quite creamy, completely fabulous because they're buttery and creamy. But what the vinegar does is cut through all that. And one of the great roles of vinegar generally is being able to kind of cut through richness. And so if you had a mayonnaise, I would love making mayonnaise, and I'm on a mission to kind of get everyone to want to make their own mayonnaise rather than just buy mayonnaise, because they're completely different things, really. We still buy mayonnaise if you want to, but make your own as well, because it's kind of completely different. But imagine mayonnaise without vinegar. It would just be really cloying and thick and fatty, and not in a good way. But you get the vinegar running through it, and suddenly it's luscious rather than just fatty. And also it can do its job of working with other ingredients, because for all sauces, not just the buttery, creamy ones, what the vinegar does is bring flavors together. That's why it's so great in a salad dressing. But if you just, deglazing a pan, you're having cooked some steaks or some duck breasts or something, take them out, put a splash of vinegar in, make a very kind of quick sauce from juices left behind the pan. And what the vinegar is going to do is just bring all the flavors together. And that is one of its huge roles. So I think sauce is something which I would love people to get a little bit more comfortable with making.
You really reminded me of something, how it interacts with fatty foods. There's a restaurant I love in San Francisco that basically is the opposite of a vegetarian restaurant. It's a Chinese restaurant that serves almost all meat. And a lot of them are really fatty things like duck and, chicken. chicken that's kind of like fatty, and like, pork that is fatty. And they always have on every table in the restaurant this lazy Susan with like black vinegar, white vinegar with chilies, different types of vinegars to kind of like be using as like a condiment with it. And I think like in a lot of recipes, I feel like it's used in the same way, like chicken adobo, things like that. It's always kind of used to kind of cut back on the fattiness of the food. You wrote about that some in your book a little bit. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think that's it really. That it does just really cut through the fat, because otherwise there's only so much of that you can eat.
Yeah.
And so it's about layering flavors and layering different aspects of what makes something delicious. And the acidity of vinegar is really important in that. But I think what's also really important is that it's not just acidity, because otherwise it would be too harsh.
Right.
What you're getting with Chinese vinegars or the balsamics or sherry vinegar, you're getting so much else. It's not just the acidity. You're getting these lovely rounded kind of flavor profiles backing it up, and they all play a part. And that's why I think it's really interesting looking at wine vinegars which are associated with a particular grape. So rather than just red wine vinegar, think about a Merlot vinegar, because that's going to come with all the things that we all may know about Merlot or Rioja or Cabernet. It will come with those flavor profiles and therefore be really interesting to use. Like champagne vinegar is fabulous, and it speaks of the champagne grape, or the champagne wine rather, it comes from, and you would use it in a very light touch way, in the way that you might drink champagne with seafood or something very kind of light and summery. So it's not just about the acidity of the vinegar, it's really thinking about what the different styles are and therefore how they can bring the best out of your food.
I wanted to ask you about the honors that you won for the book. The book was nominated and won several prestigious honors. Did you think that this was happen to the book when you wrote it?
No, obviously not. I mean, you write it just wanting to do something that you're proud of. I wanted to do something that was a bit of a statement, because there hadn't been another vinegar book like it in such depth in a culinary sense. There've been really lovely books, often American actually, about making vinegars, but this is very much not about making vinegar really. It's about sourcing and about the global enjoyment of vinegars. So I wanted to do something that was gonna be quite a serious book and quite make a bit of a mark, but I didn't for a second. I'd never done a book before, so I didn't for a second think that it was gonna win all these lovely awards. But obviously, completely gorgeous when it did.
I want to shift the focus to talk this because I've been kind of waiting to talk to you about this because I really get excited about this topic. I really love the work you do with the Borough Market, and I was listening to the podcast. You had a talk with Sheila Dillon and Alex Renton on a recent episode, and I was listening to it, and I forget about it. Whenever I listen to it, there's always this intro bit in the beginning where you can hear like the hawkers in the market talking, and it always makes the hairs in the back of my neck rise up a little bit. And I've never been there, but it gets me excited. I'm like, I feel like a dog chasing after a fox or something like that. I gotta go, I gotta go. So it's always it's a wonderful podcast, and I really love it. So let's talk about your work with Borough Market, and because you're not only the host of the podcast, but you do a lot of writing for them on their blog. You write recipes for them. How did you start working with Borough Market?
Thank you for all that, Dean. And I'm really, really delighted that you enjoy listening to the podcast. We try and get a nice mix of traders from the market talking about what they do, but also wider food industry figures like Sheila Dillon, who you just mentioned on the episode with Alex Renton. And it's really lovely that you say that, because we try really hard to give a sense of the market, because you want to do it for an audience who maybe in London and who go, but also you want to kind of stretch out to people who maybe have never been, although you are going to come, Dean, and when you come I'm going to walk around with you and we're going to do it.
I look forward to that. That's going to be so wonderful.
But we do want to kind of have, because Borough Market is such a iconic place, so we do want to get that sense out about it. But I've been working with Borough for just about 6 years, a little bit more. It was complete fluke that I got into working with Borough. So this is one of those stories which it's a sort of testament to the power of don't be scared to go anywhere and do anything. So I was invited to an award ceremony, which I was very new in working in food, and I was really nervous about going, and I sort of didn't want to go. And I would much rather stay at home in my pajamas and just, you know, not have to do the thing of like chatting to people and all of that, because I find that quite nerve-wracking. Anyway, I sort of made myself go because I knew it would be good to do it. And I did get chatting to someone there, and she mentioned that she had been offered the possibility of doing a cookbook club with Borough Market, which to me sounded just fabulous, but she was saying that she didn't really fancy it. And so I, you know, asked her permission. I did follow up by definitely asking her permission, saying, you know, if you really don't fancy it, I can see how that would work. You know, would you mind if I had a go at seeing if I could make that work? And this, you know, I find food writing, you probably feel this as well, Dean, from all the conversations you've had. Food writing is a very generous community.
Yes, absolutely.
People support each other, they want to help each other, make space for each other. I feel that so strongly in a way that in theatre, for me, that wasn't how theatre rolled. I'm sure there's aspects of theatre that are like that. The bit that I was in didn't feel that way for me. Whereas food has always felt very, very embracing. And so this wonderful food writer very generously said, no, I really, really actually don't fancy doing it. But if you do, see if you can make it work. And so I did. And so then, to be honest, I've never really looked back with Borough. It was just one of those things that was meant to be. We started the Cookbook Club 6 years ago. It is absolute joy. We have a wonderful community who take part. We do events where we choose a cookbook, people bring along something they've made from the cookbook, and then we all talk about how we all felt about it. And it's a really, really generous, positive, joyous community, and I love doing it. And then that evolved, and then I fell head over heels in love with Borough Market generally. And that evolved into doing some writing for them and hosting cooking sessions in the market and doing the podcast. And then drum roll, my news is that I'm doing a book for Borough Market.
Oh, tell us about the book, please.
Oh, it's so exciting, Dean. Right. I've not talked to any, this is the first time other than with the team I've talked about this. So it comes out in the UK in October. I believe it comes out in the States in January 23, I think.
Oh, wow.
October 22 in the UK, January 23, I think, in the States. And so we're just in the final stages of putting it together. It's called Borough Market The Knowledge, and it's very much focused on the traders and their knowledge and their skills and their expertise. So we have sections that relate to the different kinds of traders. So we have a section on butchers, fishmongers, dairy, bakery, more, where traders give us their insights into the food that they sell, the provenance of it, skills around using it, seasonality, heritage, and then I have done 80 or so recipes which come out of those conversations with the traders and really kind of showcase the produce and what people can do with it.
That sounds really wonderful. Oh my God, I can't wait to see that book. That's going to be really cool.
It's good. I have to say it's going pretty well. We're in the final stages, Dean. We in theory go to print on Friday. I'm talking to you on Monday afternoon in the UK. In theory, we go to print on Friday.
Oh my God, I can't wait to see that. That's going to be really great.
So yeah, it's really, really, really exciting to be doing that. And it feels like a really lovely coming together of my work with Borough and that connection with the Borough Market community and the wider community that feel an affinity with Borough Market. So it's very exciting to be working on.
It's going to really be great. I'm looking forward to hopefully we can have you back on the show and
Yes.
have you talk about the book. Maybe have a few other writers on there, people on there.
Yeah, I'm saying, or Dean, when you come to the UK and you come to Borough Market, we can do it from there.
I like it. I like that idea. I'd love to do that. That'd be wonderful.
But yeah, no, I'd love to talk to you about it when it's out.
what authors inspire you that you like to read? I know that's kind of a hard question, and it's kind of a lot to throw. It's like asking somebody what their favorite child is, but who are some of the writers that you like to read?
I sort of look around my desk, which is a bit piled up at the moment, and I have a lot of Jane Grigson, which, having won the Jane Grigson Trust Award, sort of feels like I have to say that, but that's not really it at all. I feel a great affinity with her work, and she was very much about wanting to demystify things, and she has wonderful books about vegetables and fruits and mushrooms and bread, and she's very detailed in a way that I would like my work to be as well. So Jane Grigson for sure, but that's kind of going back a bit. She was in her 60s, 70s writer. Modern writers, gosh, there are so many. Do you know Rachel Roddy? Do you know Rachel Roddy, Dean?
I don't. I'm going to look that name up.
Look her up. Okay, so there's a wonderful British lady called Rachel Roddy who lives in Italy. She lives in Rome.
Oh, nice.
And oh gosh, she's a writer. She has done, I think I'm right in saying 3 cookbooks, and she writes for The Guardian. And she's one of those writers who you're just there with her, or she's with you in your kitchen. She has the most gorgeous way with words, and her recipes are fab as well. So I really, really love Rachel Roddy's work. And Nigel Slater, and and lots of the big British writers, are all brilliant. But I like someone who I can not just cook from. I like someone that I can read.
I'm the same way. Yeah, I love it. I love it when they they delve into the text and stuff. I know. Because I feel like so often I grew up with a lot of cookbooks that were just kind of straight to the point. They get right to there's just recipes, nothing else. And when I started seeing people write prose and write like their thoughts or kind of delve into the topics, it was such a thrill for me. I know that Nigella Lawson recently put out a cookbook that had quite a bit of prose in it, a lot of writing about food, and she put it out as an audiobook. And I was so thrilled because it's really rare that there's anything about food that's in an audiobook. It's always mysteries and whatever, but like it's never anything about food. And to hear her read that audiobook was just a thrill.
Yeah, I think you're really, really right. It's something we talk about a lot at the Borough Market Cookbook Club, is that a lot of people do enjoy reading cookbooks in bed. They find them very, very relaxing, very, exciting as well. And they can, there's someone like Rachel's work, they can take you away to different places. I can be reading Rachel's book in my tiny London flat, and I feel like I'm with her wandering through the streets of Rome. And so, there are wonderful books like that.
Well, I often wonder if people that work with food even think that their topic is as interesting as we do, because like I'm very interested. And so I think that's why so many podcasts, I listen to a lot of food podcasts. And like when you were talking to Sam Wallace about bees, I was on the edge of my seat. It was very thrilling for me. And I doubt these people think that was just bees, no big deal. But I'm like, no, this is really cool. I love listening to this.
But I think that's part of the job of the podcaster, as you do on yours as well, is to sort of draw that out, that we all to a certain degree take what we do for granted. And I think it's the podcaster's job in a way to sort of let the audience kind of take a moment and really appreciate. The next podcast we've got coming up for our market is a guy called Jamal, who runs an organization called Change Please, which is on one level a copy stand at Borough Market and elsewhere. On another level is really doing a lot of work to help people who are homeless come back into community and have jobs and
that's amazing.
Find homes. And when I was talking to him, it's what he does every day. And so he was just like rattling off all these brilliant things he does. It's like, let's just give everyone a second to take it in. The scale, he has these. It's the episode's coming out in a week or so, Dean, so you might enjoy it.
Oh, I will listen.
They have these buses, like London buses, that go around offering dental services and doctors to homeless people, because obviously they can't access that kind of facility. And I just find that absolutely extraordinary. So I think it's our job, isn't it, when we're when you're leading a podcast, to help the audience discover the wonder when the person talking about it is what they do every day.
I really love getting a chance to talk to you, and I'm really looking forward to the new book. I want to ask you one last question though, if it's applicable. It's kind of a cheeky question. What are you cooking for dinner today?
Well, crucially not cooking, Dean. It is 39 degrees Celsius in London today.
Oh.
That is hot. You do Fahrenheit, don't you?
Yeah,
I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but I can tell you it's bloody hot. This is record temperatures in the UK.
Yeah.
So I'm not cooking anything. So very, very simple salad, I think, of some courgette ribbons, maybe some anchovies, some nice tomatoes, and obviously I'll make a lovely vinegar dressing to go on it. Probably sherry vinegar, I think.
Nice.
Yeah, so something quite nice and light and refreshing because it is baking.
That sounds wonderful. Angela, I want to thank you for being on the program. I really always love to get a chance to talk to you, and I look forward to talking to you again about the new book.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Dean. Lovely to chat.
That was my talk with Angela Clutton, author of The Vinegar Cupboard. You can check out her books and her website and the podcast by going to the link in the bio. Tune in next week. We're going to have the wonderful Barry Enderwick on the program. If you've seen his TikTok or Instagram series, Sandwiches of History, you've known and enjoyed his work. He also does some reviews of chips from around the world. I really enjoyed getting a chance to talk to Barry, and he'll be on next week. I also like to mention this podcast is sponsored by the Bay Area Historians, a group that emphasizes food and culture in the Bay Area. If you want to contribute to the podcast, you can buy me a cup of coffee or a pint by going to the link in the bio. We also encourage people to share this episode with a friend, let them know about the podcast. We also want to thank Asian Man Records for letting us use their song Talk About Love by the band Kitty Cat Fan Club. You can check out the link to Asian Man Records in the bio, maybe go and look at some of the bands that they feature on their label, and maybe listen to the music, buy some albums, buy some t-shirts or hoodies or bumper stickers, and kind of let everybody know about the label. Hope you all have a really great week and get to have some good times this summer, and I hope you all get to keep on cooking.
I've been getting